Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the vast rolling hills of southeastern Africa, where the light fades slow and warm over the horizon and cicadas strike up their sleepy chorus. You're standing in Zululand, yes, the real place, with dry grasses brushing your calves and the distant smell of wood smoke curling into the dusk. There's a low hum in the air, a kind of hush before nightfall, as if the land itself is catching its breath. You shift your weight slightly, the earth beneath your feet warm from the day, and in the valley below, something catches your eye. Rounded shapes rising from the ground like little brown mushrooms. Beehive huts. Entire villages made of them. Dozens of squat, domed shelters, seemingly grown from the soil itself. Not a nail in sight. No bricks, no screws, not even a decent hammer. And yet, they've stood here for centuries, shrugging off rains, wind, even the occasional wild animal that tried to make one a snack bar. This isn't ancient Rome or medieval France with its dramatic cathedrals. There are no blueprints here. These homes, called Indlu, were made with grass, sticks, cow dung, and intuition. Honestly, your IKEA bookshelf looks more fragile. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how global and sleep-deprived this little history club has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The grass brushes your ankles as you start down the path toward the village. Your fingers trail along a brittle reed fence, woven with more care than most people use when sending emails. It crackles lightly at your touch. The huts come into sharper view now, each one shaped like a perfect dome, thatched with golden grass, low to the ground like they're napping. The evening light catches the rounded roofs just right, and for a moment, it looks like the whole village is glowing. There's no single blueprint for these homes. Every Zulu hut builder learns by doing, by watching elders and trying not to get whacked with a stick while helping. Yet somehow, despite the lack of blueprints, permits, or anything resembling a YouTube tutorial, these huts follow a consistent logic, the same curvature, the same size, the same orientation. It's a strange mix of standardization and personal flair, kind of like baking cookies without measuring cups, yet always knowing how much flour feels right. A woman walks past carrying a bundle of reeds nearly twice her size. She nods at you, the bundle bouncing slightly with each step, and disappears into a half-built structure where laughter spills out alongside the smell of roasted maize. You catch a glimpse of children playing near the edge of the village, leaping across sleeping dogs and daring each other to poke inside a hut that everyone swears is haunted. Classic. One fun fact, well, depending on your definition of fun, is that archaeologists have found evidence of these dome-shaped huts across sub-Saharan Africa, dating back over 1,000 years. The style varies, but the essence remains. They're simple to build, cool in summer, warm in winter, and able to withstand storms that would give your average suburban roof a nervous breakdown. What's curious is that despite their elegance, these huts have often been dismissed by early European observers as primitive. You know, because they weren't made of stone and didn't include gratuitous columns. But modern architects now whisper a different tune. There's growing appreciation for the ingenuity of dome design, the structural stability, the energy efficiency, the way the wind curves around instead of smashing into flat walls. Historians still argue whether the layout of these early villages was purely functional or deeply symbolic, aligning with stars, seasons, or just Grandma's insistence on having her front door face the big tree. As you continue through the village, a low hum rises. A song? A chant? No, just someone humming as they smear cow dung across the base of a hut. It's not as gross as it sounds. In fact, it's surprisingly clean once dried and helps seal the floor and walls. Think of it as the original eco-friendly insulation. Cow dung, because sometimes nature just knows what it's doing. You pause at the edge of the compound where a newly constructed hut is mid-assembly. A curved skeleton of bent saplings stretches overhead like ribs, lashed together with strips of bark and vine. There's no metal, no nails, no screws. Yet already the shape holds, taut with tension and patience. There's something meditative about it all. You can almost feel yourself breathing with the rhythm of the village. The simplicity is deceptive. Every curve, every thatched panel, every reed is placed with care born of centuries of tradition. You're standing not just in a home, but in a living memory. The sun dips lower. A goat bleats somewhere behind you, sounding deeply annoyed about something, and a small child chases it with a stick, utterly convinced he can outrun it. He cannot. And you, well, you're just beginning to see the genius that hides in the humble curve of a Zulu hut. You kneel beside a quiet pile of materials stacked neatly near the edge of the clearing. To the untrained eye, it looks like someone's just gathered yard waste, tangled bundles of reeds, long whippy saplings, stacks of grass, and lumps of wet earth. But if you've been watching closely, and by now you have, this is the raw stuff of architecture. Not steel, not marble, not even clay bricks. Just nature, reshaped with a bit of sweat and a lot of collective wisdom. The saplings are flexible but strong, freshly cut and stripped of their bark. The reeds are dry and golden, rustling in the breeze like whispers. The grass is coarse and tough, not the soft lawn kind, but the kind that means business, the kind that can thatch a roof and still hold steady through a rainy season. And the mud, well, it's not just mud. It's a hand-mixed cocktail of clay-rich soil, water, and yes, cow dung. Try not to wrinkle your nose. It's not like you'll be licking the walls. A woman nearby shows you how she selects each piece of grass with a sort of unhurried confidence, plucking one out of the pile, giving it a little shake, then setting it aside like a conductor choosing a flute over a clarinet. The materials might look basic, but the selection is anything but random. Everything here has a purpose. Everything has a job. Even the dung. Let's talk about that dung for a second. Historically, cow dung has been the Swiss Army knife of traditional Zulu construction. When mixed with soil and straw, it becomes a sticky plaster that sets hard, seals cracks, and keeps insects away. Once dry, it doesn't smell. It also smooths the interior surfaces, keeps the floor compact, and adds thermal mass, science speak for keeping things cozy when it's chilly and cool when it's hot. You're not just building with nature, you're building in harmony with it. Your air conditioning? Baked into the walls by a cow. Nature wins again. Nearby, someone hands you a reed. It's longer than your arm and surprisingly light. You bend it gently. It doesn't snap. This, you're told, is umthala, a reed prized for its flexibility and durability. It will eventually become part of the thatch, but not before it's dried, trimmed, sorted, and carefully arranged like the bristles of a giant, upside-down broom. The hut's skin, so to speak. There's something charmingly anti-industrial about all this. No plastic tarps, no scaffolding, just hands, rhythm, and community. It's not even a one-person job. Building a Zulu hut requires collaboration. Neighbors, relatives, sometimes even passers-by who get guilted into helping while trying to walk past. It's a bit like trying to casually stroll through your cousin's garage while they're moving furniture. If you make eye contact, you're lifting something. While historians still debate whether the construction process followed a strictly codified method or evolved informally through generational habit, what's clear is that these techniques survived for centuries with barely a blueprint in sight. Oral tradition carried the knowledge. You watched your mother smear dung along the wall. You watched your uncle bend a sapling into an arch without snapping it. You tried it yourself, failed, cried a little, then tried again. That's the curriculum. One mainstream fact that surprises many. Early European settlers in South Africa often ended up mimicking elements of Zulu construction, particularly the insulating properties of grass and earth. In the colder inland regions, settlers even built their own thatched homes, though with more sharp angles and far more complaining. And here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some anthropologists believe the selection of grasses wasn't just practical, but spiritual. Certain species were thought to protect against lightning, evil spirits, or bad dreams. Others were gathered only during specific lunar phases. Whether or not you believe that lightning can be cowed by a lucky blade of grass, it certainly adds a poetic twist to the process. You watch a boy pick up a handful of dried reeds and tuck them under one arm. He stumbles a bit, the bundle nearly toppling him over. He grins sheepishly at you, then keeps going, disappearing around the curve of a half-finished hut. There's a pride in his step, even if the reeds are trying to eat him alive. The sun's nearly gone now, and the village glows from within. Fires crackle in small pits, casting warm orange light across the domes of the huts. You see their texture better now, each one slightly different, yet part of the same rhythm, like notes in a melody. The grass gleams like gold, and you can hear the faint murmur of voices drifting through the night. You sit for a moment and close your eyes. It's quiet, but not empty. The land hums. The huts breathe. You imagine all the years these walls have stood, how many storms they've weathered, how many stories they've held. You open your eyes again, and the stars have come out, bright and fierce, scattered across the black velvet of the sky like powdered sugar on a dark cake. Delicious. You're not even that hungry. Probably. Tomorrow the building will continue. More saplings will be bent. More thatch will be stacked and tied and coaxed into place. No power tools. No trips to the hardware store. Just hands, knowledge, and a reverence for the quiet genius of natural things. And you? You're exactly where you need to be. The sun stretches long fingers over the ridge by morning, brushing light across the village like someone gently shaking your shoulder after a deep sleep. You rise slowly, your limbs heavy with the kind of rest that only fresh air and crackling fires can give. The smell of cooked maize still lingers in the air, and as you step outside, the grass is cool beneath your bare feet, soft dew gathered at the edges of every blade. Ahead of you, a group has already begun work. The skeleton of a new hut is taking shape, and you drift closer, drawn in by the slow choreography of people, sticks, and string. It's like a kind of dance, but without music, and somehow with more grunting. This is the beginning of the hut, the frame, the bones. It starts with a circle carefully traced on the ground, its radius often stepped out by barefoot builders pacing in slow, deliberate arcs. The hut's shape isn't guesswork. It's memory and repetition. Even now, in places where this tradition continues, you'll see builders using their bodies as tools, arms for measurement, feet for marking, calloused fingers to test tension. No tape measure, just ancestral geometry. You watch as the builders drive long, thin saplings, typically thomba or hlanga, into the earth around the circumference. These vertical stakes will form the skeleton's primary supports. They're pounded in with the flat side of an axe or a rock wrapped in cloth, because who needs a rubber mallet when you've got centuries of improvisation? The next part is the magic trick. The saplings are bent inward toward each other, meeting at a central point to form a dome. It's one of those moments that feels like it shouldn't work, like a structure so organic, so gentle-looking, should just collapse under its own optimism. But it doesn't. The tension created by bending the saplings creates stability. The more you pull inward, the stronger it gets. You notice one young man struggling with a particularly stubborn pole. It keeps springing out of place with the elastic energy of a grumpy cat. An older woman walks over, gives him a look that says, "You're trying too hard," and fixes it with a single twist of bark fiber and a perfectly placed knot. He nods sheepishly. Everyone pretends not to laugh. Historians still argue whether this precise dome shape was chosen purely for practical reasons, resistance to wind, internal temperature regulation, or whether it also carried cultural symbolism. Some say the beehive form represents harmony with nature, or the curved horizon, or even the head of the ancestral spirit. Others suggest it was simply the most efficient shape to build quickly with available tools and materials, and anything spiritual was a bonus. But it's hard not to see poetry in it. You stand back and watch as more bent saplings are woven together, creating a rib cage that seems almost alive. When the light hits just right, the framework glows faintly gold, and the gaps between the poles cast elegant shadows on the dusty ground. It's engineering, yes, but it's also sculpture. One mainstream fact worth noting is that these huts were often built by the extended family together, and could be finished in just a few days if everyone wasn't distracted. Sometimes, multiple huts would go up in a week, each for a different purpose: sleeping, storage, cooking, ceremonies, and the occasional awkward in-law visit. You'd know which was which by size, layout, and sometimes decorative touches like carved posts or painted doorways. You're handed a length of bark twine, scratchy and fibrous, and shown how to wrap it around intersecting saplings. There's no hammering here, just friction, knotwork, and the subtle art of knowing when something is tight enough. It's weirdly satisfying, like lacing up a giant shoe made of trees. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some cases, The saplings themselves are chosen not just for bendability, but for their alleged ability to ward off insects or snakes. There's even one variety, Umuthi wendlovu, which roughly translates as elephant medicine tree, said to discourage large animals from getting too curious. Whether this works or not is up for debate, but you're not about to question the logic of anyone who's shared real estate with hyenas. A young girl beside you hums softly as she peels bark with her thumbnail, tossing the strips into a neat pile. Her hands move with quiet assurance. She's done this before. She probably learned before she learned how to walk. That's the thing about skills passed through generations. They seep into muscle memory like lullabies. No textbooks, just time. As more supports are lashed into place, a spiral begins to form. Thin branches woven horizontally through the vertical ribs, adding another layer of strength and structure. It's like watching a basket get built upside down, or a giant bird's nest built with actual intention. You almost expect to see an eagle land and say, "Nice work, humans." You take a step back. The dome's curve is near perfect, elegant, organic. Somehow, it's already starting to feel like a shelter, even without the skin of thatch or the dark embrace of shadow. It breathes. It holds itself upright like it's proud. Around you, people start to disperse, heading for water, snacks, or maybe just a nap under a nearby tree. The workday isn't over, but here, time is measured in shade and rhythm, not deadlines. You sit beside the skeleton of the hut, feeling the sun creep up your back, and you realize something odd. This dome feels familiar. Not in the "I've seen this on a postcard" way, but in the way caves feel familiar, or tree hollows, or the inside of your childhood blanket fort. It's a shelter shaped like comfort, like safety. You get it now. No nails, no wires, no screws, and yet it stands. You wake to the sound of rustling grass and laughter. Someone is trying to shoo a goat away from a half-finished hut, and the goat, naturally, is deeply unimpressed. As the sun rises higher, the builders return, not with trucks or tools, but with baskets, bundles, and quiet banter. The skeleton you watched yesterday now awaits its skin, and this, you're told, is the stage where the hut begins to truly come alive. It starts with more saplings, thinner ones this time, woven horizontally between the vertical ribs of the dome. It's a process called wattle, and yes, it's the same technique found in wattle and daub, houses from medieval England to rural Asia. Global village, meet global village. Here, though, it's done with precision and rhythm. The bark strips are soaked just enough to bend, then pushed and threaded in, weaving in and out like a basket. You can't help but admire the pattern, loose, then tight, then loose again, allowing for airflow and movement. The hut is breathing before it's even finished. You try your hand at weaving a section and immediately jam a reed into your palm. Smooth. A woman nearby smirks and fixes your mess with the speed of a caffeinated spider. You thank her, and she just shrugs, probably wondering how you survived this long without basic survival instincts. Once the lattice is complete, it's time to bind the entire frame together. No nails here, still. Instead, thin cords made from bark fibers or twisted grasses are pulled tight around junction points. knots tucked neatly like tiny secrets. The tension of the materials alone keeps the structure from wobbling. It's architectural origami, but with twigs and sweat. One mainstream historical fact that gets overlooked. This method of construction has been around since the Iron Age in southern Africa. In fact, the very word Indlu, meaning house, is found in multiple Bantu languages, reflecting a deeply shared tradition. The style of construction changes slightly from group to group, but the principle holds. Bend, weave, bind. Let the earth guide the form. And now comes the daub. This part is messier. A mixture of clay, sand, and, you guessed it, cow dung is slapped onto the lattice in thick, wet handfuls. It squelches satisfyingly through your fingers, and if you weren't so focused on not getting it in your mouth, you might find it meditative. One builder jokes that this is the part that separates the casuals from the committed. You're officially inducted. The daub fills the gaps, smooths the surface, and begins to give the hut its solid, earthy walls. As it dries, it hardens into something surprisingly resilient. Not quite concrete, but close. And with none of the carbon footprint. Somewhere, a smug environmentalist is high-fiving an imaginary friend. You notice that some huts have intricate patterns pressed into the wet daub, simple spirals, dots, or thumbprints. These aren't just decorative. In some regions, these textures help water run off more efficiently. In others, they're a kind of family signature, a mud-made surname pressed into the wall itself. A reminder that this home belongs to someone and always has. And here's a charming fringe tidbit. In certain Zulu communities, specific wall motifs are said to invite good dreams, while others warn off thieves or nosy spirits. Whether or not these work, they add a quiet dignity to the surface, like tattoos that whisper rather than shout. You watch as the walls take form, dark and lumpy at first, then drying into a gentle ochre. The scent is strong, earthy, pungent, not unpleasant. The kind of smell that says, something real is happening here. It sticks to your clothes, your hands, even your hair, and somehow you don't mind. Historians still argue whether this nail-free technique was a conscious rejection of imported European building methods or simply a case of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. After all, these huts have survived floods, fires, even colonial skepticism. Your average suburban drywall? Not so much. As the sun arcs overhead, the builders rest in the shade, sipping from shared gourds of fermented sorghum beer. You try a sip. It tastes like slightly sour oatmeal with dreams of being champagne. An acquired taste, they tell you. You believe them. One builder explains that once the frame and daub are complete, the structure is allowed to rest for a few days. It needs to breathe, dry, settle, just like people. No one rushes the process. Unless, of course, rain is coming, in which case everyone turns into the architectural equivalent of a NASCAR pit crew. You step inside the half-finished hut. Already, the temperature shifts. It's cooler, quieter. Light seeps in through the unfinished roof, dappling the earthen floor in patches. It's empty, but not hollow. You swear you can feel the walls humming. Or maybe it's just the effect of the sorghum beer. Your feet leave faint impressions in the soft floor as you pace slowly in a circle. You touch the walls. solid, cool, alive in a way drywall never is. Back outside, a young girl runs up with a basket of bark strips and dumps it triumphantly on the ground. "For the roof," she says, and then immediately gets distracted by a dog and forgets about you entirely. You're learning that everyone in this village has at least 3 jobs: builder, gossip, and part-time goat wrangler. The dome now looks fuller, tighter, bound together with layers of woven logic and dried patience. Still no nails, still no metal, just intention, trust, and the uncanny ability to make sticks stand up in a way that feels almost impossible. You sit on a stone near the edge of the compound and watch the walls dry. Shadows stretch long. The air grows still. And the hut simply waits, becoming morning again. And this time, it's the smell of scorched grass and smoke that wakes you. Someone's preparing the thatch. The final layer of the hut, its skin, its shield, its glorious green-brown mop of a haircut. If the skeleton was the bones and the daub was the flesh, this is the outermost defense, the thick, warm, rain-shedding coat that makes these huts famous. You stroll over to a clearing where bundles of long, dry grasses lie in tight sheaves. Most are ikili, a sturdy variety that's been sun-dried to perfection. The bundles are tied with bark string and laid out like sleeping snakes, stiff, ready, and somehow looking like they could come to life if you turned your back for too long. A group is already working, sitting cross-legged with the quiet focus of monks and the finger speed of concert pianists. They're sorting the grass by length and thickness, snipping frayed ends, and brushing out any seeds or bugs that have made themselves too comfortable. It's meticulous. You try to help, but your bundle ends up looking like a bird's nest that lost a bar fight. No one says anything. They just quietly hand you a smaller task. Hold the bundle. You've never felt so trusted. One woman shows you how to fold the grass into fan-like panels, layering it in such a way that water runs off instead of soaking in. Each panel is lashed to a supporting rib of the hut's frame using more bark cord. The process is slow but hypnotic. Fold, place, tie, tuck. It's like wrapping a dome-shaped birthday present, but one that needs to survive tropical storms and maybe the occasional leaping baboon. And yes, one quirky tidbit. In some communities, the very first bundle of thatch placed on the roof is whispered to. Quiet blessings, sometimes even jokes, are said into the grass before it's secured, just in case the hut listens. You know, for luck, for ancestors, or maybe just for the satisfaction of talking to something that won't talk back. Like a toddler, but more stable. As the thatching begins, you watch the dome transform from skeletal wood to something solid and soft-edged. The overlapping grasses are laid from the bottom upward, like shingles on a roof, each layer overlapping the last by just enough to shed water and create insulation. It's a technique known across the world, from Ireland to Japan, but the Zulu execution is elegant and economical, using fewer materials and tighter curves. One builder leans back and looks at the roof with a critical eye. "No leaks," she mutters, then smiles. "If it leaks, we send you back to collect frogs." You nod solemnly. You have no idea if this is a real punishment or just village humor. Either way, you're already regretting yesterday's slapdash reed weaving. A mainstream historical fact here. The effectiveness of thatched roofs in Zulu huts isn't just anecdotal. In fact, modern thermal imaging has shown that these structures maintain more consistent indoor temperatures than many concrete block homes in nearby regions. During the midday heat, the thick grass acts like a heat shield, and at night, it retains warmth. All without fans, freon, or fossil fuels. Still, the debate lingers. Historians and architects argue whether this efficiency is deliberate science passed down through the ages or just a happy accident of trial and error. Some scholars suggest the design emerged purely from material limitations. Build with what you've got and make it work. Others point to recurring patterns in hut orientation, ventilation, and thatching as evidence of encoded knowledge. Smart architecture, disguised as tradition. You move closer to the nearly finished roof. The topmost layers of thatch are being shaped into a rounded apex. No peak, no chimney. Just a smooth, tapered dome. It reminds you of a beehive, a seashell, maybe even a monk's shaved head. Sacred, calm, complete. As the builders work, someone calls for the smoke test. It's exactly what it sounds like. They light a small fire inside the finished hut to check how smoke travels. If it lingers or escapes too slowly, they adjust the thatch density or leave a small opening near the roof's peak. Too much smoke? Bad sleep and watery eyes. Too little? You freeze at night. It's a delicate balance, like seasoning soup with air. One builder tells you how, in some places, families will add a tuft of aromatic grass or herbs near the roof's center, so when the hearth is lit, the rising smoke carries a faint perfume, like a medieval air freshener, but without the plastic pine tree. You crouch and run your fingers along the lower edge of the finished thatch. It's thick, at least a foot in places. Birds and insects will try to burrow in eventually, but regular maintenance keeps it tight. Once a year, someone climbs up with a new bundle, patches the weak spots, and comes back down with stories and twigs in their socks. You step inside the completed hut now, and it's like stepping into a warm, earthen whisper. The thatch overhead mutes sound. The air is cool, slightly sweet. The dimness is gentle, not gloomy. There's no echo. Your footsteps land softly. Even your thoughts seem quieter. The floor, still earthen, has been smoothed and sealed with more dung plaster. In time, it will be polished to a shine using river stones and ash. For now, it's cool and slightly springy underfoot, like pressed leather. A perfect spot to sit, or nap, or simply listen. Outside, the wind picks up, brushing through the grass roofs of nearby huts. The village hums softly. No motors, no machines. Just the sigh of breeze through reeds and the occasional cluck of a judgmental chicken. And somewhere above you, the thatch holds, silent, patient, brilliant. No nails, no screws, just knowledge, layered like the roof itself. You duck inside one of the finished huts again, and this time you linger. The outside world falls away as you pass through the low, rounded entrance. It's barely taller than your chest, forcing you to bow ever so slightly, a subtle act of humility baked right into the architecture. Inside, the air is thick with quiet. You hear your own breath, the shifting of your feet, the soft crackle of a fire smoldering somewhere nearby. The thatched dome curves above you like a protective sky, its woven grasses catching the soft light that filters in through tiny gaps near the roof's peak. It feels oddly womb-like, not in a weird way, in a comforting, primordial shelter kind of way. The inside of a traditional Zulu hut isn't cluttered. There's no IKEA futon or wall-mounted flat screen. Instead, the space is clean and intentional. To your left, a circular hearth sits at the center, its ashes carefully swept to one side. Around the edges of the room, mats are rolled or laid flat, woven from river reeds in tight spirals. A wooden headrest leans gently against the wall, curved like a saddle, smooth from generations of use. And that's about it. Minimalism, long before it became an Instagram trend. The walls, once mud and dung, have dried into a warm ochre. They breathe. You place your hand on one and feel it cool and slightly textured, like baked earth. It doesn't feel fragile. It feels settled, grounded, like it's seen things and chosen to stay quiet about them. One mainstream historical fact that surprises many. In traditional Zulu homesteads, umuzi, huts weren't just built for sleeping. Each had a specific function, and their placement reflected the family structure and spiritual priorities. The mother's hut often sat closest to the center, while the father's, sometimes grander, faced the entrance. Cattle pens were placed nearby, often in full view, because cows were wealth, and also excellent gossip detectors. In the hut you're sitting in now, the floor is subtly sloped, higher toward the walls and lower toward the center. You didn't notice it at first, but it makes sense. Rain, spills, even tears, they all flow inward, not outward. Symbolic? Maybe. Practical? Definitely. A small trench encircles the hearth, keeping moisture away from sleeping areas. You wonder how many architects with degrees have ever thought to do that. There's a surprising coolness here. Outside, the midday sun presses hard against the land, but in here, you'd swear it was 10 degrees cooler. The thatch and thick walls insulate better than you expected. You lie back on one of the woven mats and stare upward. From this angle, the symmetry of the dome is mesmerizing. It's like a cathedral built by hands that never once consulted a compass. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some oral traditions claim that when a new hut was finished, the first night was always spent in total silence. No talking, no fires, just the walls listening. Why? Some say it was to allow the spirits to settle. Others say it was just a test to make sure no one had made a mistake that would haunt them later. Either way, that first night had a ritual weight to it, an understanding that even homes need to breathe before they're lived in. A few children poke their heads inside, giggle at the sight of you sprawled out like a confused gazelle, and run away. You wave after them, and their laughter drifts off into the distance. You think about how many childhoods have been raised under roofs like this. How many lullabies have echoed through this very air. How many grandmothers have sat in that exact corner, clicking their tongues in judgment, knitting wisdom into every sentence. The layout is circular for a reason. There are no corners in a Zulu hut, no sharp edges. Everything curves. The space encourages conversation, shared meals, open eyes. You can't hide in a corner if there isn't one. The architecture itself asks you to be present, to be part of the circle. Historians still argue whether the circular design originated from cosmological beliefs or simply the practicality of materials. Some say it reflects the Zulu worldview, a cyclical understanding of life, death, ancestors, and rebirth. Others point to how easy it is to thatch a circle versus a square. The truth? Probably both. When you live close to the land, practicality and spirituality often hold hands. You glance toward the entryway. It's still low, still demanding that little bow each time you enter or exit. It's not just clever against the wind or prowling jackals. It's symbolic. Every time you step into your home, you humble yourself. You acknowledge the protection of the ancestors. You nod to the roof, the walls, the hearth. And here, deep in the hut's belly, it's so quiet. The fire pit is unlit, but you can still smell the smoke from last night's embers. The earth holds memories like that. Subtle, smoky, soft. It's easy to understand how one could fall asleep in a place like this. You feel your eyelids getting heavier. There's no ticking clock here, no buzzing fridge, just the occasional creak from the grass above and the soft scurry of something tiny across the floor. Probably a gecko, maybe a spirit, maybe both. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. Rain pounding on the thatch, wind curling around the dome, and you, wrapped in a blanket, lying here, untouched, sheltered. Not because of fancy materials or modern engineering, but because someone, somewhere, bent a sapling just right. No nails, no plans, just patience, and love disguised as grass. When you step back outside, the sun is already tilting westward, bathing the entire village in that soft, golden hour light that makes even goats look majestic. From a small rise overlooking the homestead, you take in the full view for the first time. The village as a whole, not just a collection of huts, but a system. A world built in miniature, round and orderly and humming with quiet logic. From above, the layout resembles something nature might have designed. A beehive, a spiral, a constellation brought low. The huts form clusters, usually grouped around a central cattle enclosure. This open-air kraal, made of strong thorn branches, is the heart of any traditional Zulu homestead. Not just a place for animals, but a spiritual axis, a living vault of wealth, memory, and prestige. Every night, the cows return, and with them, so does balance. You move through the spaces between huts, soft, curved footpaths packed down by generations of bare feet. There are no fences here, no concrete walls, just subtle separations made with sticks, reeds, or the occasional strategically planted shrub. Privacy exists, but it's more a dance than a boundary. People know when to look away, or when to offer a bowl of fermented milk and pretend they didn't hear the argument inside. The layout itself isn't random. One mainstream historical fact often missed by outsiders is that the orientation of huts, especially the main entrance to the homestead, is traditionally aligned with the east. Why east? Because that's where the sun rises, and in many southern African cosmologies, it represents beginnings, clarity, and the ancestors' first light. Even now, Some builders still insist on aligning the homestead's front door to meet the dawn. But the pattern goes deeper. The huts aren't plopped down wherever there's space. They follow a hierarchy, a spatial logic based on gender, age, status, and function. The father's hut, often larger and placed prominently, is a kind of throne room. The mother's hut is the kitchen, the nerve center, where decisions are whispered while stirring porridge. Sons and daughters get their own smaller dwellings as they age, sometimes directly behind the parents, sometimes nestled further out like satellites in a gentle orbit. You pass a hut with markings along the base, subtle lines etched in the mud, a few pebbles arranged in what looks like an unintentional pattern. A woman nearby catches your gaze and says, "That's where my grandmother sat every morning facing the cows. She said they listened better at sunrise." You nod, unsure if this is metaphor or livestock training advice. Possibly both. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some anthropologists believe that the spiral or circular layout of certain Zulu villages mirrors the spiral of the cow's horn, an animal sacred in both symbolism and economy. There's even a legend where the founder of the Zulu people, Zulu Kamalandela, dreamt of a spiral village just before uniting his people. Is it history? Is it mythology? Historians still argue whether these stories shaped the layouts, or if the shapes simply inspired the stories. Further along the outer edge, you come across the Indlu Yesangoma, the hut of the diviner or spiritual healer. Unlike the others, it's painted with soft geometric patterns, and its entrance is flanked by bundles of herbs and small gourds hanging from the eaves. It feels different. You don't go inside. You just nod respectfully, the way one does in front of locked doors that seem to breathe. Nearby, a child points out a hut with no smoke hole and no sleeping mats. "It's for grain," she says. You peek inside and find baskets stacked neatly, each woven tighter than a banker's handshake. Even the storage here has dignity, function wrapped in craft. As the shadows lengthen, the village begins to change its rhythm. Women sweep dust from the entrances of their huts, not because the dirt is offensive, but because the act of sweeping resets the space. Like lighting a candle or fluffing a pillow. A few fires are lit. The smell of roasted corn drifts your way. Children chase each other, shrieking, their feet kicking up dust like tiny storms. The goats, meanwhile, continue plotting. You settle on a flat stone overlooking the whole scene. It's easy to romanticize it, but you know this village isn't a museum. It breathes, adjusts, endures. There's laughter, but also chores. Beauty, but also mosquitoes the size of small aircraft. The huts require care. Grass needs replacing, walls need patching. But the same can be said of anything worth keeping. You remember how modern urban planners spend millions trying to design livable communities, with buzzwords like organic flow and walkable layouts. Meanwhile, this spiral of domes achieves all that with zero cement and an economy powered by goats and gossip. No sidewalks, no streetlights, just logic, ritual, and paths worn by memory. You glance up as a woman emerges from her hut, carrying a clay pot. She moves gracefully, the pot balanced perfectly on her head without any visible effort. She steps lightly, following the curve of the path, not rushing. The pot doesn't wobble. Neither does she. You realize the village itself moves that way, unhurried, circular, self-contained. like a wheel that never stops turning, like the horn of the cow, like the curve of the hut. No corners, no nails, only the lines drawn by life itself. By now, the village is lit not by sunlight, but by firelight. Small flickers dotting the homestead like stars come down to earth. As night settles, everything slows. Conversations drop to murmurs. Pots clink softly, and you find yourself pulled toward the most sacred space of all, the hearth. Inside one of the main huts, a fire has been kindled in the center pit. It glows low and steady, casting orange light up the curved walls. The smoke curls gently through a gap in the thatch, tracing lazy spirals that fade into the darkness above. You sit cross-legged on a mat, palms resting on your knees, eyes half-lidded. The warmth seeps into your bones. You haven't spoken in minutes, and no one expects you to. The hearth isn't just for cooking. It's for stories, memory, rituals. This is where the oral history of the Zulu lives, passed from mouth to ear, generation to generation, with no need for books. You listen as an elder begins to speak, her voice low and even, like a drum softened with cloth. She speaks of Shaka Kasenzanga Kona, the great unifier, of battles fought not just with spears, but with clever formations, the bullhorn, the encircling charge. She speaks of the time when huts like this stood across entire valleys, watching over proud clans with names that thundered through the hills. And then she pauses, not for drama, but to sip. Everyone waits. Storytelling here is not rushed. One mainstream historical fact worth noting: the hearth was often the legal, political, and spiritual court of the home. Here, disputes were resolved, names were given, marriages were planned. Even the ancestors, it's believed, gather around the fire. Hence the etiquette. Don't point at the flames, don't step over the fire pit, and certainly don't throw your leftovers into it unless you want an elder's glare to burn hotter than the coals. The walls of the hut hold the story like a bowl. The fire crackles. A baby fusses somewhere across the village and is gently hushed. A pot is stirred. Time folds in on itself. You begin to understand that the hearth isn't a feature of the home. It is the home. Your fringe tidbit for this evening? Some traditions say a small piece of the first fire ever lit in a hut is kept burning, or at least reignited ceremonially every time the hearth is rebuilt. A spark from the past, carried forward. Not literally fireproof, of course, but spiritually durable. That ember is a kind of soul. When it dies, something must be acknowledged, cleansed, restarted. You suddenly understand why fire starting is treated with such reverence here. And while historians still argue whether this reverence for the hearth originated in religious cosmology or practical survival, the result is the same: a cultural cornerstone glowing at the center of each curved home. The fire is comfort, warning, celebration, mourning. It marks seasons and births and deaths. You're offered a piece of roasted mealie, corn cooked in the coals, smoky and sweet. It burns your fingers slightly, but you don't care. You chew slowly, the flavors warm and rich, the heat lingering in your mouth. Food here isn't about variety, it's about presence. about being fed by the same fire that once warmed your grandfather. Someone hums nearby. Not a full song, just a breathy, wordless tune that loops and folds into itself like wind through tall grass. The elder continues her story. This one's about a clever jackal who tricked a lion. Everyone chuckles at the punchline, even if they've heard it 100 times. That's not the point. The point is hearing it again and again and again until it becomes part of your blood. You lie back, your head resting on a rolled mat. The fire's glow dances across the thatch above you, flickering like thoughts in a sleepy mind. It's easy to imagine all the other fires across the hills, glowing in other domes just like this one, warming other hearts. Generations mirrored in flame. Outside, the night is deep and soft. Crickets sing. A cow shifts and sighs. The scent of wood smoke clings to your clothes. You'll carry it with you for days, long after the story ends. Inside, the dome holds everything gently. The walls curve around you like a closing hand, like a shield, like a whispered promise. You're safe here. You belong here. Rest. No thermostats. No electricity. Just fire and people and silence full of stories. You wake slowly, not to an alarm, but to the distant thrum of morning life returning, chickens scratching, wood being chopped, someone whistling off-key. The embers of the hearth still glow faintly, like the last heartbeat of a dream. You stretch, bones cracking gently, and duck outside into crisp morning air. There's something sacred about mornings in the homestead. The light is pale and shy, filtering through mist and tall grass, making the thatched domes look like they've been dusted with silver. Everything feels slower, like the village is shaking itself awake without urgency. You follow a worn path past a line of huts toward the back of the homestead, where something less visible but equally important takes place. Today, you're learning about maintenance. No, not the glamorous part of history, not the kings or warriors or fire-lit legends. This is the part few people ever talk about in documentaries. But without it, nothing lasts. And when your entire shelter is made from earth, grass, and wood, everything is in a constant, quiet negotiation with time. You come upon a pair of women patching the side of a hut. One is slapping a fresh mixture of clay and cow dung onto a hairline crack with her bare hands. The other smooths it in wide arcs with a flat piece of gourd. The movement is rhythmic, almost musical. You half expect them to break into song, and honestly, if they did, it would make perfect sense. One mainstream historical fact that's almost never appreciated. Traditional Zulu huts require ongoing maintenance, but when done regularly, they can last decades. The myth that such structures are primitive or temporary comes more from colonial ignorance than architectural truth. In reality, a well-maintained ikukwani, that's the Zulu word for a beehive hut, can outlast a corrugated iron shack by many years, and it doesn't boil its occupants alive during summer. You ask if the maintenance schedule is fixed. The women laugh. The walls tell you, one says. And they do. A crack here, a bulge there, a patch of thatch that darkens too fast after rain. The hut speaks, if you learn to listen. You begin to suspect most ancient knowledge is just good observation with poetic flair. And here's a fringe tidbit. In some regions, the maintenance process is deliberately performed in silence, especially if it's the elder woman's hut. Not for spiritual reasons, necessarily, but because it's believed that speaking during patching invites gossip into the home. Whether or not that holds water, pun mildly intended, the result is a kind of meditative choreography that would make a minimalist designer weep. Nearby, a young boy clambers up a ladder made from a bent tree trunk, repairing the roof with bundles of fresh thatch. He moves like a squirrel, balancing on the curve of the dome, tying grasses into place with ease. His sister tosses up bundles from below, each one landing in his hands like a practiced dance. There's no shouting, no instruction, just a rhythm. The kind of rhythm that only comes from doing something the same way your great-great-grandparents did it. Historians still argue whether the durability of these homes was intentional engineering or just the natural result of necessity. Some claim the continual repair tradition proves these structures were never meant to last. Others argue it shows a profound understanding of sustainability. Build with what you have and keep it breathing. After all, a house that heals itself is never truly broken. You take a turn stirring a new batch of daub. The mixture is wetter than you expected, heavy and cold. You press it between your hands and smear it onto a test patch, trying not to wrinkle your nose at the dung. The smell, to your surprise, fades quickly. Once it dries, it's just earth again, stronger, smoother, more alive. Around the homestead, you begin to notice signs of maintenance everywhere. Thin ropes tying down the windward side of a roof. Small gourds hung from eaves to catch leaking spots. Patches of lighter clay marking recent touch-ups. It's a mosaic of care. A conversation between builder and shelter, continued daily. You pause to admire one older hut in particular. Its walls have been repaired so many times that the layers resemble tree rings. Each coat of plaster a record of seasons past, stories told, repairs made after storms or births, or the occasional enthusiastic goat. It looks lived in, respected, as though the house has aged right alongside its occupants and is proud to show it. And you begin to realize something else. The labor isn't just about upkeep. It's about connection. These repairs are acts of love, of memory, of dignity. Just as we patch jeans instead of tossing them. Just as we bandage knees and kiss foreheads. This is not maintenance. This is relationship. A rooster screams in the distance, possibly just for attention. The boy on the roof yells something back that sounds vaguely rude. You decide not to translate. Down below, someone lights a small fire near a half-finished hut, ready to smoke out insects before the next patching begins. You sit and watch the whole thing unfold. The hands, the tools, the laughter, the sweat. No power drills, no permits, no YouTube tutorials. Just people and time. And homes made from the same earth that will one day take them back. You find yourself drawn again to the central open space, the kraal, where the cattle are beginning to wander back in from the surrounding fields. There's a slow, steady rhythm to their arrival, hooves stirring dry soil, lowing blending into the birdsong, the whole scene backlit by the amber of a setting sun. The kraal isn't just for animals. It's the symbolic and spiritual heart of the homestead. Traditionally, this is where major rituals happen: marriages, funerals, sacrifices, and ceremonies of naming. The cattle, circling lazily within, seem to know they are more than meat or milk. They are ancestors with legs, wealth with eyelashes. You lean against the outer fencing, which isn't so much a wall as it is a carefully constructed tangle of thorn branches. Impenetrable if you're a predator, forgiving if you're human. It curves like everything else here. No harsh corners, just spirals and loops and soft boundaries. A mainstream historical fact here. Cattle in Zulu society were, and still are, currency, status, and kin. Lobola, or bride price, is paid in cows. Debts are settled in cows. Feasts are measured by how many cows are offered. When King Shaka consolidated his rule, it wasn't just with soldiers, it was with herds. A man with 10 cows wasn't just well-fed, he was politically significant. As dusk falls and the kraal fills, families begin to gather around its edge, not for any specific event, just to sit, to talk, to be. You're handed a gourd of amahewu, a fermented maize drink that tastes like someone tried to make yogurt nervous. It's oddly refreshing, and you sip it slowly, careful not to wince. You glance up to see one of the older men tending to a sick cow, speaking softly into its ear as he rubs herbs along its flank. It's not a treatment you'd find in a vet's manual, but the cow leans into it with the trust of an old friend. You suspect this is less science and more ritual. Or maybe that's the same thing here. And now for your fringe tidbit. In some Zulu traditions, it's believed that the spirits of ancestors rest in the kraal overnight, lingering among the animals. Children are told not to run across it after dark, not out of fear, but out of respect. Stepping too quickly through that space might wake someone whose dreams are still settling. Whether literal or not, it's a powerful idea. That memory lives among the living, not hidden in some far-off cemetery, but right here, munching grass beside your door. Historians still argue whether this centralization of livestock was purely practical or deeply metaphysical. Was it designed for protection and proximity, or was it meant to keep the ancestors close, grounded in daily life? Some suggest both. As with most things here, the sacred and the sensible seem to share a roof. A young boy tries to lasso a particularly moody calf, and it goes about as well as expected. The rope misses entirely, and the calf trots off with the mild disdain of someone who's seen better attempts before. The boy collapses into giggles. No one scolds him. Someone just says, "Try again when it's sleeping." Nearby, a woman is braiding dried grass into a long rope, threading small beads into the pattern. "For the wedding next month," she says, "the bride's hut will need a new rope curtain." You nod like you understand completely. You don't. But you know it matters. You realize something. This space, this kraal, is one of the few places where everything converges. Man, beast, spirit, work, rest, ritual. It's a living diagram of how the Zulu see the world. Connected, cyclical, close. You lean back and watch the sky darken. Stars begin to appear, one by one, like someone's lighting them carefully from the other side. Smoke rises in gentle spirals from the huts. Children are called inside. Someone begins to sing. A low, rhythmic chant that matches the sway of the cattle as they settle. There's no rush here, no need to push forward. The kraal doesn't change shape overnight. It doesn't need to. It's always in the center, always holding what matters most. You remember how, back home, you once lived in a house where the living room was barely used, where people sat alone in different rooms, scrolling through separate screens, where dinner was microwaved, eaten standing, where no one ever stood in a circle just to feel the weight of the sky. Here, things are simpler, not easier, but simpler. You sip the last of the amahiwu. You listen to the cows sighing, and you feel the ground hum beneath your feet, not with electricity, but with memory. No concrete foundations, no Wi-Fi signal, just earth and cattle, and the quiet echo of 1,000 evenings just like this one. The stars are out in full now, scattered across the sky like seeds flung from the hand of a generous God. They shimmer through the thatch as you lie once more inside your hut, watching pinpricks of light twinkle where the woven grasses part ever so slightly. The air is cooler, the earth beneath you warmer, and for a moment you wonder if this is what it means to feel perfectly balanced. But tonight, the village isn't entirely at rest. There's a quiet gathering near the edge of the homestead, just beyond the last hut, where a few elders are performing a small ceremony. Not a loud affair, no trumpets, no fireworks, just incense, softly spoken names, and a circle of people honoring something much older than themselves. You're invited to watch, so you do, stepping carefully, barefoot, the soil still warm from the day. The circle forms around a small fire, its flames fed not with ordinary wood, but with herbs and bark with names you can't pronounce. The smoke smells sweet and faintly bitter, like tea that's had too much wisdom steeped into it. One mainstream historical fact that deserves more attention: Zulu spiritual practices are deeply intertwined with their architecture. The placement of huts, the alignment of entrances, the spacing of the kraal, all reflect not only social structure, but sacred design. Every curve and doorway is built with intention, meant to allow or resist spiritual flow. Even the fire's location inside a hut follows traditional cosmology, central, connecting the human and the divine. The ceremony tonight is a simple one, an ukubuyisa, a homecoming ritual to call a recently departed ancestor back to the homestead, not as a ghost or menace, but as a protector, part of the family's spiritual entourage. A gourd of beer is passed, prayers are murmured, and when the name of the deceased is spoken aloud, the fire flares briefly as if acknowledging the invitation. Here's your fringe tidbit. It's believed that a well-built hut can hold a spirit better. The tighter the thatch, the stronger the walls, the more respected the structure, the more likely an ancestor will feel at ease staying near. Which means these homes don't just shelter bodies, they shelter souls. Real estate agents could never. Historians still argue whether this view of architecture as cosmology is original to the Zulu or a convergence of Bantu traditions adapted over centuries. Some suggest the designs mirror ancient Central African practices, while others argue they're unique to the southern tip of the continent, born from this land's winds, hills, and weather. No consensus, of course, but plenty of admiration. Back inside your hut, you feel different. Not in a dramatic enlightenment kind of way, just steadier. You sit near your hearth and light a tiny, careful flame, not for heat, just for the feeling. The fire crackles politely. Shadows stretch along the walls. You take a slow breath, in through your nose, out through your teeth. It smells like clay and ash and time. Above you, the thatched dome looks less like a roof and more like a sky unto itself. You can trace the ribs of the frame, the pattern of the weave. Everything built without a single nail. Only tension, patience, bark, intuition. You remember earlier in the day when one elder told you, "A hut teaches you how to be still. If you're noisy inside it, it gets louder. If you're calm, it listens." And you feel that now, how the quiet seems to deepen in response to your own stillness, like a living partner in silence. You take your fingers and press them lightly into the earthen floor, feeling the cool texture, the tiny grains. Somewhere beneath this soil, thousands of others have stood, sat, slept, sighed, laughed, cried. Their weight pressed into this same earth, their breath warmed by similar fires. Outside, the night creatures begin their song, a rhythmic, whirring lullaby of insects, frogs, the occasional owl. It's not loud, but it's not silent either. It's full. You realize you've stopped needing silence to feel peace. You just need presence. The village now is utterly still. The ceremony has ended. The cattle sleep. The stars lean close, listening. And here you are, inside a hut made of nothing but grass, wood, mud, and the stubborn hope that it will hold. No alarms, no insulation, just stories baked into walls and a roof that hums back when you hum first. You close your eyes. The fire winks once more, and the dome above you curves like a lullaby. It's your last day in the village, and you wake with a bittersweet feeling, not unlike the fermented porridge they gave you on your first morning. The hut greets you with its usual quiet strength. The walls seem to exhale as you sit up. The thatch lets in just a sliver of gold. You can already hear the village moving, soft brooms against dirt, the low hum of conversation, a distant child yelling something about a chicken. You stretch, slowly, savoring the way your joints remember the shape of this place. You don't want to leave, but huts like this, villages like this, aren't meant to trap. They're meant to hold and then let go, the same way a thatched roof holds water until it spills into the soil. Outside, you take one last walk. The air is cool, a little damp. Dew clings to the reeds and to your toes as you pass through narrow paths between homes. There's a group of women already working, kneading clay for another hut, laughing between phrases that you can't quite understand but feel invited to enjoy anyway. You realize, watching them, that building here is never just about construction. It's choreography, social glue. Every hut is a fingerprint of its makers, a reflection of seasons, skills, and stubbornness. A snapshot of time and identity woven into each curve. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor you. While the Beehive hut is often described in simple terms as a rural or tribal shelter, UNESCO and other cultural heritage organizations have begun recognizing these structures as examples of sustainable, vernacular architecture. In other words, homes made without extraction, pollution, or carbon guilt. Each one returns to the earth when its time is up. Try saying that about a suburban split level. And now your final fringe tidbit. Some builders bury small items beneath the hut's hearth before construction begins. Not relics, necessarily, just objects with personal meaning. A bead, a carved stone, a bit of bone. They aren't labeled. No plaques. Just quiet whispers placed into the floor. It's not for anyone to find. It's for the house to remember. Historians still argue whether this tradition is rooted in ancestor worship, animism, or simply the human urge to leave a trace. But the point remains. Even if no one ever digs them up, the things left behind make the space feel more alive. You wonder if your old apartment ever held anything that sacred beneath its linoleum. You return to your own hut one last time. You look at the curvature of the walls, the texture of the daub, the slight give of the earth beneath your feet. You press your palm to the center of the floor and stay there for a moment, just breathing. Someone knocks gently. No doors here, just woven reeds or polite coughs. It's the boy from yesterday, the one who climbed the roof. He holds something in his hand, a small bundle of thatch tied with string. "You helped," he says with a shrug. "So this is yours now." It's a gift, maybe even a joke, maybe a symbol. You're not sure. But you take it, and it matters. The rest of the day moves like honey, slow and warm. You eat one last meal. You help sweep one last path. And then you stand at the village's edge, looking back at the spirals of dome roofs, the smoke rising, the laughter carried on wind. You don't want to leave, but you do. Because that's the thing about these huts. They're not built to imprison. They're built to root. And those roots travel with you, even after your footsteps fade. The hut behind you glows softly in the late afternoon. And though it's small, curved, fragile by modern standards, it holds the same power as any cathedral, any castle, built without nails, but never without care. And now, as the sounds of the village drift further away, and your thoughts grow slower, softer, you let yourself ease deeper into rest. You imagine the feel of that earth beneath your hands again, cool, textured, forgiving. The walls that curve not to impress, but to embrace. The roof that rustles with each breeze, not as a warning, but as a lullaby. All around you, the memory of the hut remains, a space that holds stories without speaking, a place where silence is never empty, but always full of life. You remember the scent of smoke, of thatch warmed by sun, of sweet herbs tucked into bundles like blessings. It clings to your clothes, to your mind, to the quiet space just behind your eyes. You breathe in, and you let go. The night deepens. The stars blink slower now. The fire fades to embers. And you, too, begin to fade, not in fear, not in loss, but like a hut built strong enough to rest when the work is done. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let your thoughts curve gently inward, like the walls of a perfect little dome. Let the world spin outside while you stay right here, nestled in stillness. You are safe. You are home. You are held. Good night, traveler. Sleep well in the quiet, nailless shelter of your dreams.